ShareFile and the modern security landscape. We've got Mike McAndrew, who's a solutions engineer, Nitin Kumar from the product management team, and Matt Cobbs from our engineering team as well.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mike McAndrew. I'm a solutions engineer over here at ShareFile. I'm on the pre-sales side. Thanks for everyone for joining.
I'm Matt Cobb. I'm an engineering manager that's over our security and compliance team. I've been here about 3 years. I'm really excited to talk about some security best practices.
Hi everyone, my name is Nitin Kumar. I'm from the product management team of ShareFile. Happy to see you guys here and talk about security and the best practices.
My name is Teppei and I'm a customer success engineer. Originally came from like the support side as well too. We want to cover authentication, personal information, data storage, secure sharing, and compliance. And then what's your opinion on authentication in the current security landscape?
ShareFile supports multiple ways to securely authenticate today. By default, the authentication can happen by providing the username and password, but we also have the capability to configure and to leverage a SAML IDP to authenticate within enterprise credentials if you have one. Right. So I see a large percentage here who is told about don't know. So for them, SSO is about single sign-on, which ShareFile supports through SAML IDP, and we have a number of SAML IDP that we support today.
Like Nitin was saying, using single sign-on is a huge benefit to security, and it makes managing those credentials a lot easier. And it's our opinion that it's a best practice to at least have single sign-on on your ShareFile account. What about like two-factor authentication and multi-factor authentication? What can you tell us about that?
All right. So two-factor authentication is now a table stakes, right, in industry today. I mean, it's required, it's a must-have for securing your account. And ShareFile supports two-step verification, and it can be enabled to add a second step for users to authenticate with their ShareFile credentials. So if you are using ShareFile user ID and password, two-step verification can be enabled for that. The verification takes place through a verification code that's being sent to the user via text message, or you can also use an authenticator app to provide that one-time password for authentication.
For single sign-on, I did want to clarify that we also provide support for ADFS, Azure, or Okta, any kind of SAML provider there. And with those SAML providers, we can support two-factor authentication. So that's something to remember. Another thing that I did want to talk about is password requirements. And then what's your opinion on password strength and password requirements?
Right. So by default, ShareFile supports a minimum of 8 characters, and which should consist of one uppercase letter, one lowercase letter, one number, and one special character. But as a best practice in industry, we recommend our customers to have a minimum of 10 to 12 characters, and which includes the one uppercase, one lowercase, one number, and one special character. So a 10 to 12 character is the ideal and the most secure one.
What if I wanted to set up, let's say, restricting access to the ShareFile account from certain locations and such? How would I go about doing that?
Right. By either granting or denying permission to certain IP addresses or IP ranges. And this can be done for either all the employees, all the clients, or for everyone, right? You can include all the employees and clients together and either provide access or deny access to them on a certain range of IP address. This can currently be done with the help of support team, ShareFile support team, and you can restrict access to a certain range of IP address.
And then last, I did want to mention some additional options that we have within ShareFile. We do have ways to, for example, restrict the life of a token and such for authentication so that sessions don't linger and such. That's always a good thing. So if you have web sessions that you have launched, you want to make sure that those inactive sessions are getting logged out. You don't want those, an employee walking away from their laptop and they have that ShareFile account open in like a coffee shop or something along those lines. Same thing with desktop applications. If a laptop is stolen and they get access to the laptop, you want to make sure that you're able to wipe or remove that authentication token from those applications, and you can do all that through the ShareFile control plane as well too. Great. All right, let's move on to personal information then, or personal data is a really hot topic, I would say. It's not about just your personal information getting out, it's about data that can identify you, right? So information that could be used against you or for like phishing attacks and such like that. Even like your social media account, you may just have like some family photos or something along those lines, but that kind of information could be leveraged against you to try and access other resources. And so when we talk about personal data, we want to be also talking about personal day-to-day stuff too, plus your private information, such as your social security numbers and like your home address and such. So when it comes to ShareFile, we store your personal data there too, within our compliances, right? So we'll talk about the compliance portion of that later here, but when we're talking about it in the ShareFile data world, we want to talk about, I think, cover HIPAA and GDPR topics. So those are more related to, your health information or your privacy information. Then what else can you say about personal information?
So one important thing to know there is we maintain separate control planes for US and EU, which means any data, any metadata that we store remains in US if you are a US-based company, and remains in EU if you are an EU-based company, which is a must for HIPAA and GDPR compliance. So that's the first thing that needs to be understood here. From the metadata perspective, we do collect some metadata for users, but this is mainly for the user management purposes and for the reporting purposes. Some of the metadata that we collect there is around the first name, last name, user login, company name, which is an optional field. We collect password, but that is hashed, so nobody knows about it. It is stored in the form of a hash, and a security question and security answers, and along with the ACLs. So that's on the user management, user objects and metadata that we store on ShareFile management.
One more thing that I do want to add is if you do business in the EU, then GDPR is a compliance. It's something that you need to be looking into as well, because you are collecting personal information about those citizens in the EU. Let's see. We also do have like encrypted email features within ShareFile to protect, again, personal information that might be in the body of an email. But I think Mike is going to be talking on those topics here later.
This is from Jeff. So one topic that rarely gets talked about is backup and recovery of ShareFile data. Beyond previous file versions, what recovery options are available to us in case of like a ransomware attack, malicious employee bulk deleting everything, or any other event that requires us to bulk recover that ShareFile data?
Yeah, sure. As far as crypto locking is concerned, we always recommend having file versioning enabled, and it is enabled by default. So if something like that were to occur, you would isolate whatever machines were infected by that malware, and then once you've isolated those machines, then we can go back and restore those files to their previous version.
And that's kind of outside of like the typical versioning features that we have within the ShareFile Lin UI, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just going to be the normal versioning. If you don't have it enabled, then we're not going to be able to roll back to those previous versions.
Right. Yeah. Mike, you want to take over?
Sure. Thanks, Teppei. Yeah, so we're going to be talking about a few things here. First, we're going to be talking about data retention. We're going to touch a little bit on CASB and DLP, and then we're just going to kind of talk about high-level architecture overview and just talk a little bit about cloud versus on-premises storage. So data retention policies, these are going to be determined by the admins, the users that are administrating the ShareFile account. This is really just going to come down to how you're managing your data in your folders. With the file retention policy on folders and on the account, you can set a time on how long you want those files to be. It's stored either in a folder or by default on ShareFile. When those files are deleted, they get moved to the recycle bin, which they then sit there for 45 days. And after that, they're permanently deleted. Just to kind of touch on that, we maintain a slow deletion standard where essentially anytime you delete an item, it's going to go to the recycle bin for 45 days. Again, we'll just touch on file versioning. This is enabled by default with unlimited versions. So you can limit those versions if you want, but typically most customers are going to be keeping that set to unlimited. So you always have all those older versions of files.
And also, just to call out on that topic, like the way that ShareFile does versioning is actually pretty great for recovering from crypto locker software. Normally, you would think about this, at least my engineering view is, you might have a daily backup, which your like last recoverable backup that you can go to. That might be a day. With ShareFile, you're saving a version of the file each time, so you can roll back to the last version that wasn't affected, right? So it really does give you great recoverability instead of having to work on maybe you haven't backed up in a month and that's the last backup you have. So it's great to be able to have that fine-grained control.
Yeah, and then that applies like when you're using like the online editing feature as well too. Anytime you save a change there with the online editing, it saves it back into ShareFile as a new version. So if you keep that unlimited versioning, then you can go back as far as you need.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the color, guys. Deploy a dedicated antivirus on all of our servers that scan all uploaded tenant files for viruses and malware. The result of the scan is added to the file metadata, and based on the antivirus policy configured on the account, access to those infected or unscanned files may be blocked for users. We also have disaster recovery procedures in place to ensure that all data is protected in the event of some kind of catastrophic event, such as a natural disaster Our disaster recovery procedures include regularly testing backups and recovery processes to ensure that data can be restored quickly and reliably. And just as far as backups, we use a redundant storage system through AWS. That's where cloud data is hosted. That's where our control plane is hosted. So we conduct regular backups of data to protect against data loss.
Especially because we're leveraging AWS, it's basically best in class redundancy and availability, right? So, and when we're talking about those two concepts, they sound similar, but they're slightly different, right? So redundancy is making sure you have multiple copies, which is it's good for all your data. You'll hear about it all the time of what is it? One or two's one and one's none is how they talk about backup. So you really do need to have multiple copies of everything. So with having that built-in redundancy because of our cloud architecture, it really does make sure that if some catastrophic event happens in the world, your data is still going to survive. The other part of that is actually availability. So awesome that you can, have the data. It exists in the world. It isn't lost. But if you can't get to it, especially on cloud service, it doesn't matter. It's not good to you. So with the way we've set up our architecture, we really are using some of the best tools out there to be able to architect it correctly.
What's your opinion about using ShareFile as kind of like a backup solution?
So we don't really advertise ourselves as a backup service. That doesn't necessarily mean you can't use ShareFile to back up some of your data. What a lot of our larger companies do is they kind of use ShareFile as a hot storage where the data that they're working on and sharing and editing, that's what they're keeping on ShareFile. When they're done with that sort of life cycle of that particular file, they then move it into more of a cold storage sort of place. So there's a place where ShareFile sort of fits in to that whole thing. We do have multiple storage zones available around the world that are managed by us. That's US East, US West, Northwest. We have Japan, Singapore, Australia, EU, Canada, and Brazil.
Yeah. So if you have a need to have multiple storage locations, you can always contact the ShareFile support team, and they can have those storage locations added for you. Now, the storage location can only be modified for like each root folder, but I would say if you have, let's say, a team based out of Japan or something like that, and you want to keep your data close to your user as possible. So we'll go into this a little bit more with the on-prem storage as well too, but general rule, keep your data close. Yeah,
absolutely.
And also make sure you know where your data is. So with that, there's bunches of regulations of data residency requirements. Like specifically, everyone talks about GDPR, but I know there's various ones in Canada and Brazil and even Japan and Australia, depending on who you do business with. So make sure you have that set correctly. We offer plenty of regions to be able to do that. And yeah, that is a very important thing to keep track of.
I just want to touch on these two things. If you're using cloud storage, you can actually use some CASB systems out there, cloud access security brokers. They would leverage our API and can provide you some of those DLP type features. If you're using on-prem storage, you can use a traditional ICAP solution, which can integrate with your on-prem storage.
Yeah, and just to add to that ICAP, we also do AV scan.
So just a little bit on our cloud storage. We operate a hybrid cloud infrastructure with our control plane and our storage tiers. We've talked a little bit about that. We touched on the metadata that the control plane sort of uses to deliver the service. Again, hosted on AWS, so you get all the reliability of that. The storage zones, they've been configured to only support TLS 1.2 connections with up to 256-bit AES encryption, no less than 128-bit encryption. Yeah, you want to move on to the next slide?
Sure.
We got some architecture stuff. Okay, yeah, on-premises storage. Basically, what's going to happen is that's going to allow you to choose where your data is going to be stored, and you'd be managing the storage zone controller, you'd be managing the backup of the data. Most of the time when we see customers using on-prem storage, it's for compliance reasons. They have to have their data stored on-prem. Sure. So just kind of want to give you guys a high-level overview of our architecture here. Matt, did you want to speak a little bit to this slide?
Yeah, sure. So as Mike has previously mentioned, the best way to think about our application is basically being split up into two different planes, if you want to call it that. There's the control plane, which is really all the brains of the operation. That's where you see our pretty web UI, or if you've interfaced with our APIs before. That's where all of that lives. That's where we keep track of all the users and the files and everything else in between. The second plane is called our storage plane. So these are our storage zones that are around the world. This is where your data is actually stored at. So when you upload a file to us, this is where it's going. So this can just be thought of as kind of the buckets that we throw everything in.
And the next slide is just going to kind of show very similar. As you can see, you would just be managing the on-prem piece, the storage zone. The control plane doesn't change. One thing with the storage zone controllers, which is kind of cool, is our network share connectors, which allow you to access network shares through ShareFile. So great little feature there.
Yeah, the plus to me with the network shares for the storage zone controller, and this is going to get a little too deep, but it's just you don't need a VPN, right? So with ShareFile, when you're accessing the network shares, you don't need to set up a VPN to get to the data. Typically with traditional VPNs, like you're setting your entire device into that network, right? So, I mean, to me, that you're putting a hole into your network just to get to some network shares. If you go through ShareFile, you're just granting the ShareFile web application or just ShareFile application to those network shares. Kind of wanted to add another thing with the storage portion. We kind of glossed over it, but with the redundancies, one of the important things is it's with the cloud storage, it's really hard to pinpoint where your data actually is, right? Because you have dynamic IP addresses but then with like on-prem storage, your data is just sitting in one location. So when you have on-prem storage, it's a really good idea to keep like a NetScaler in front of it and keep, for high availability and just for separating the the networks out to make sure that you're securing your data.
And I'll also say, we keep saying on-prem storage, which most people think is a data center or a colo or whatever else, right? And a lot of businesses have that. Maybe it is the server closet in the back corner, right? But you can use the on-prem to also mean a different cloud or your own account in the cloud, right? So if you want to go to AWS, GCP, Azure, wherever else, and feel like you're truly controlling your data for whatever compliance or regulation reason, you can use it for that as well.
So we're just going to go over real quickly how a download request works on ShareFile. So, first thing that's going to happen, client is going to request a file that's going to go to our control plane. From there, a prepare message is sent by the control plane to the stored zone hosting the file. The location of that file is stored in our control plane. And then from there, a hash-based message authentication code, or HMAC, based on that shared key used to establish the trust relationship between the control plane and the stored zone, is sent as part of the prepare message. Once that's validated, the stored zone confirms the validity and generates a unique one-time download token. And then from there, the ShareFile web app or API servers provides the download link containing the fully qualified domain name of the stored zone controller to the end user or client with that unique download token. From there, to start the download, the client connects directly to the stored zone. The download token is validated, and then if validation is successful, the file will be retrieved from the storage, and then the client will download the file.
And then the token expires.
Right.
All of this is encrypted. It's all over TLS. It's all secure. It's one of those things of especially having to sit through a few audits for both customers and the various frameworks we do. I get it all the time of you got to put the nice little padlock so it shows, right? Normally the auditors love that, just so I don't have to say it to them. But yeah, so this is all over, it's both encrypted at rest and encrypted in transit here. So there's no worries about that.
Thank you everyone who registered early and provided some feedback. We really appreciate that. We saw a lot of questions on secure sharing and protecting client data. So I'm just going to go over some of the share settings that are available to you when you're sharing files. We're going to talk about 3 main ways to do that. First one is going to be the web application. The second one is going to be the Outlook plugin. And then the third will be from the Citrix files for Windows application. On the web app, real easy. When you go to share file, you're going to see a little context menu to the right of the copy button next to the link. You'll have the edit options button there. Once you click that, you'll be presented with some drop-down menus. From there, you can allow people with a link to either view only or download, and then you can determine the level of access control. That's what's really going to determine sort of the who's going to access this file, right? If it's not a sensitive file and you just need people to get it, you just want a secure route of that file getting to that client, you might do anonymous, or maybe if you want to just gather some information from who's downloading it, you do name an email address. Otherwise, if it's something sensitive, you're going to want to require users to log in. So you have those options for those sensitive documents. That's really what we recommend, is requiring the login there. Outlook plugin, real similar. So you can set the default there by clicking the options on the ribbon. If you want to use custom settings for a specific email, you can do that too. You can change all those settings that you see on the screen there. You can also lock down these settings as an admin. So if you want your users that are using the Outlook plugin to only be using specific settings, you can lock those in.
Yeah, so the Outlook plugin is a great tool if you're worried about, let's say, files not being sent securely, right? So this way, the file, you can set the Outlook plugin to always convert it an attachment as a ShareFile link. That way, all your email files or attachments are being converted and sent securely through ShareFile. and setting some kind of default, like let's say login required to access the files. It's a great tool. It's probably
it's a most used tool.
most
If you're not sending out links or sending emails to share files with ShareFile, alternatively, you could just add a user to a folder and set their permissions on the folder. For users that are logging into ShareFile a lot and using, messing with data in ShareFile, this is how you're going to determine that level of access. And you can get as granular as you want with this with subfolders. You can have subfolders with different permissions than their parent folders. Essentially, if you give someone download permissions, they'll be able to download anything from that folder. Upload permissions, they'll be able to upload files and create new folders. The admin setting there, that's just gonna let them add other people to the folder. And then I think delete is pretty self-explanatory. Citrix files for Windows, real easy. When you right-click on a file and you click share, you're gonna get that first window there on the left. If you click on the edit link options, that's where you're gonna see those share settings, and you'll be able to, determine those settings from there.
Yeah. I forgot to mention this, but when you're using the Outlook plugin and you convert the attachment, it gets sent to the file box.
Correct.
Yeah.
By default, it's going to get sent to the file box, which is essentially just a staging area in ShareFile for when you're just sharing files.
Right.
You can point the Outlook plugin to upload to a specific folder on the account too, if you'd like. We had some questions on encrypted email, so we wanted to touch on this. There's three different ways you can send an encrypted email. The first way is when you're sharing an item from the web application. If you click on send to specific people, you'll see that option to encrypt this email. What that's going to do is just encrypt the body of the email. The file, that's already encrypted, that whole connection is already secure. But if you want to encrypt the body of the email, that's when you would use the encryption feature. The other way you can do that is if you go into your inbox on the left and go to sent, there's a compose button in there, and you can also compose encrypted emails from there.
The Outlook plugin.
Outlook plugin, yeah. So the other way you can do encrypted email is with the Outlook plugin. Again, you can set those default options within the plugin options, or if you want to use custom settings for a specific email, you can do that. You'll just click the encryption button up there at the top. If you click it, it'll turn on. If you click the little drop down there, you'll see the custom settings button. And compliance, cool, we made it. Yeah, so we have a handful of different compliance efforts over here. We have HIPAA for healthcare focused customers. We're GDPR compliant. We run annual SOC 2 audit, and we also have the ISO 27K, all that. And then we also have the option for companies that are regulated by FINRA. If you need to archive your data in accordance to FINRA, we also have that option. Typically, we only recommend enabling the FINRA archiving if it's totally necessary, because you will lose some features with that archiving enabled. Matt, did you want to go into some of this?
Yeah, sure. So first off, just calling out GDPR. This is a non-negotiable for a lot of companies, including ourselves. We do business in Europe with European citizens and other people that are in the EU. So we have to have this. This is, I think, if I remember correctly, that the fine for non-compliance is up to 4% of your global profits. Or I think it's actually net revenue, so not profit. So this is a big deal. I remember when this came through the tech industry originally, when it was first passed, and it was years worth of work for certain tech companies to come through. So if you're not aware of this and you're doing business in Europe, I would tell you to reach out to someone knowledgeable about compliance or a lawyer to get more specifics about it. ShareFile can obviously help you here. We have search features and other things that help with document discovery and things like that. It was also another big one for us. We work with a lot of medical professionals that are processing personal health information. We take this very seriously, obviously. I think anyone can understand that they wouldn't want their medical records stored insecurely. So if you are interested in this, please reach out to our support team. We can get the whole BAA process started and make sure that we're an approved vendor for you. And then kind of our bread and butter here of how we structure our compliance programs is SOC 2 and ISO 27000. So these are very related. SOC 2 is bigger in the US, especially with accounting firms. ISO 27000 is much bigger in the EU, is a bit more prescriptive, and they're pretty related. They overlap maybe 80% with a little bit more on top. So these are seen as widely accepted industry best practice type compliance frameworks to adhere to. And I say these are very related. We've even went to a point now where we're combining our SOC 2 audits and ISO 27000 audits. This is things around access controls, change management, how we're doing all of these internal processes to make sure that we're staying secure, and there's audit trails, and there's encryption and other things as well. So this is literally my day job. This is what I do all the time. So I could go on about all of these subjects for probably far too long. But if you have any questions, if you need reports to review for your own purposes, please reach out to our support team. We can link you into our trust center. They're all posted there and available.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And I think that's a great segue to sort of talk about our trust center. We've got a lot of great resources on there. We have our ISO certificates on there, our HIPAA certificate, and we also have our SOC 2 Type 2 audit report that will require NDA, so you have to create a Citrix account, sign the NDA in order to access that. Another great resource on there is the security due diligence package. That's also going to be on the Trust Center and require NDA. Basically, that due diligence package was created for customer security inquiries to provide readily available security information. That's going to include a completed 800 plus SIG core questionnaire, an overview of our security posture and controls, and some evidence of some selected policies and controls. If you're not familiar with a SIG, that's the Shared Assessment Standardized Information Gathering Questionnaire. And it's the most used questionnaire among our customers and is leveraged across all industry sectors. If you have questions, definitely look into the due diligence package. It streamlines these types of things considerably, and gives us the opportunity to provide immediate security information to you. So yeah, check out those links. Go to the Citrix Trust Center, and yeah, please take a look.
Great, thanks, Matt. Sorry, Mike, probably Matt.
Close enough.
But yeah, so additional resources we have here. Again, we've talked about the security and compliance in the Trust Center. We also have a new ShareFile docs page, which is docs.sharefile.com. Has all our how-to guides, like configurations. Like if you're looking into like the SAML configurations and such, you can go there and you can find it. We also have all our past webinars posted on our YouTube channel. You can go watch them if you want. A lot of them are hosted by like people like us, like me, Mike, Matt, and then we also have feature webinars. So if you like this kind of webinar, let us know, and yeah, we'll have more of them. And I guess we'll go into Q&A now if we have any. Allison, did you see any?
Yeah, Teppei, I got some.
Okay.
Kind of been throwing it in our Slack, but I can read off some if that helps.
Yeah, that'd help.
Is there any reason to work with a backup service to have cloud backup of ShareFile data with all the security and redundancies that ShareFile has in place?
I mean, that's a great question. I think, if you ask any security expert, they're going to tell you should have at least 3 copies of your data. If ShareFile is one of those, great. But you should probably still have two more sets of data. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, so the being the one that has to make sure we're following all of our internal policies here, so like actually going through RDR drills and everything like that right now. So more copies aren't going to hurt. It's really, especially security, what it comes down to at the end of the day is your budget. So if you have enough of a budget to actually go out and store your copy in 3 different countries and 2 different planets, perfect. It's going to be perfectly like redundant. You're not going to have to worry if an asteroid hits the Earth. On the other hand, if that's not really making sense for your company, then yes, ShareFile is redundant and secure. Like, you don't have to worry about your data being lost or corrupted here, but always more copies is better. Always copies on different services is better. Obviously, like it's one of those things of security in general. It's always a question of budget compared to revenue and everything else.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of also like on the storage zone, the on-premises storage zone portions. The data that's being stored there that's related to ShareFile, you can again make it redundant through like any kind of cloud service, like third-party cloud service like AWS or Azure. If you host those storage zones on the cloud, you can make it redundant. So it's a great thing. And for me, like backup is not just in like a ShareFile kind of issue, right? Or like your business related kind of thing. Like even in your personal life and such, like you should be backing up your data. You don't want to lose any of your personal information as well too. So backup solutions.
Yeah, it just kind of goes back to the old saying, don't have all your eggs in one basket. But, we have a really secure basket. So, I think it just comes down to just general security practices. In general, it's just always good to have multiple sets of your data. And as far as the backup piece, on the cloud side, you don't have to do any of that. We're doing all of that for you.
Yeah.
All righty, that's a great. I like our secure basket of eggs. This one from Jeremy. He uses ShareFile for his business. 13 employees, got MFA, everything. He doesn't give his employees the ability to delete files. Unfortunately, this means they cannot rename or move files. If an employee misses a file and they have to go to me to move or even rename it, and I give them the ability to rename. If I give them the ability to rename or move, I also have to give them the ability to delete. And then he doesn't want an employee to simply delete their shared folders and then clear their recycle bin, and then all of his data is gone forever. What are you doing to fix this internal security threat? He did mention other providers he's seen is they have a code to authorize different scripts so that users can have the ability to execute a copy and delete script code. And then users can just do a delete script. So I don't know.
We don't have any feature like that. I mean, it's really, you either have delete permissions or not, right?
Well, you can have on-prem storage. So if you have an on-premise storage zone controller, you can give your users delete permission. And because ShareFile stores the metadata, you can use the recovery service to recover those files. That would be my answer.
Yeah.
Is on-prem storage, because we do have those recovery services available on the storage zone side. I mean, but yeah, I kind of think that that's if you're in ShareFile, if you give the user upload permission, they can go in and delete the files they've uploaded, right?
By default, you can disable that.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah.
That's creator can delete.
Yeah, creator can delete, I think is kind of like a way to work around that.
I mean, specifically why move isn't allowed if you're disabling delete is because then you could just move it into a folder that you do have delete permissions on and then delete the file there, right?
Yeah.
So it's all kind of intertwined of why it has to be set up that way. But yeah, that's definitely something that we could pass on to our support team and product managers to see if that's some sort of feature request that we should start incorporating.
Yeah, absolutely. So disabling a user just means they're not going to be able to log in, but they're still going to be in there.
Yeah, they own data. They, it's still using an employee license and things like that. Now, client users are a little different. Client users, they don't have any kind of data ownership, so it's just kind of they can't log in and access the ShareFile data. But for an employee side, if you delete the user, I mean, their activity is still on the ShareFile side, and all the data will be reassigned to a new user.
Did we get an option to choose a user to reassign their data to?
An employee user.
Employee user, yeah.
A bunch of compliancy questions with a lot of acronyms that I don't know. But things like the CMMC and FedRAMP, as well as the current or future plans to support CUI. Anything around those make sense to anybody else?
So we're in talks for that. Is what I'll say. That obviously we're always evaluating all of these compliance frameworks that seem to come up like weeds, and seeing how that fits our customer base and their needs. So I don't know if we can really disclose anything further than that, but we are looking at all of these. We are aware of all of these. It is a constant conversation.
Okay, so I have my webinar demo account here. So if the login page looks a little different than what you have, it's because I have single sign-on configured. I don't have two-factor authentication for single sign-on just because this is a demo account, and I don't have any valuable data in here. But yeah, so I've already got the credentials logged in through Azure, so I go straight through. And if I go into my admin settings and look in the security tab, you'll see all the features you have. So again, if you have like the DLP integration with your on-prem storage, you'll see the controls here for how to restrict access to the certain types of scanned documents or unscanned documents. Then password requirements. This is where Nitin was kind of talking about. Default for your client users, we have it set to, or client users or any ShareFile accounts that don't have single sign-on configured. These are the default values it's going to store is used. Now, again, our recommendation is to at least go 10 to 12 in the complexity or the length of the password. And then under the login and security policy, you have the two-step verification. Our recommendation, again, setting up two-step verification for all your users is pretty much the industry standard. With the two-factor authentication, what's your guys' opinion about which one you should use? Nothing, having some kind of two-factor authentication is better than none.
Yeah.
But text or application.
Yeah. So in general, it's thought that the application-based two-factor, second-factor, multi-factor, however you want to refer to it, is better than text. I have actually worked for companies before where very high-level employees have been SIM-jacked when they only had text-based authentication. Now, don't get me wrong, that's better than none. It is very much the first easiest step that most people can make into enabling multi-factor. because 9 times out of 10, people don't have to have a certain level smartphone or anything, really a cell phone, and you're good. And it's easy to roll out to employees. The Authenticator app goes a little bit further than that because it does tie it to an individual device. And even now there's things coming out like FIDO smart keys, where it's basically a physical second factor, to where now instead of it being on a phone that might be compromised in some way through malware, that it is literally a pretty much a USB key that is on your key ring that you have to be able to log in.
Right.
Then there's bunches of other things like biometrics and everything else as well, to where even now I would say, talking about multi-factor authentication, there's even some companies and organizations that are advocating you go away from passwords altogether, and you have 2 different other factors, just because then you don't have to have memorize these super long complex passwords to be secure.
Right.
ShareFile is coming up with a number of new exciting features on security and content analytics. In fact, I answered some of the questions around the content analytics piece here in the poll. So we would like to get your sign up for beta features. If you are interested in these features, we'll reach out to you for next level of conversation.
Yeah, again, thanks for everyone's time. We appreciate you coming out. Please reach out to your account manager if you have questions about, upgrading your ShareFile now that you've seen all these great new features. We're happy to help.